Hi friends, welcome to my channel. This is Duana and I'm here with another sew along for you, and this time it is for my Dani pattern. This pattern includes 3 views. View A is the vest, view B is the dress, and view C is the romper, and that is actually what I'm doing my sew along on today. The good thing is view B, the dress, and view C, the romper, are very similar, so you can follow along with the dress as well. I think the most amount of views I've ever done for a pattern is like 4. But I like a lot of views. I like when you can change it up. You know, you want the same style, but maybe you want a dress, or you want a pant version. This is actually one of my first pant version patterns, so I'm really proud of it. I also really love the collar. It took me forever to get this collar right, but I really wanted to make this pattern come to life. I love this pattern. I've actually designed this pattern a while ago and I finally just got to it. It's just been in my files, but I just haven't had time because I had a baby and all that stuff. So I'm back and I am better and I'm excited to share my Dani pattern. So let's get started. I also want to say that I got this fabric from Paris. This fabric is so gorgeous. I love it. So here are the pattern pieces. This is pattern piece 2A and this is the side front, and you're going to cut 2 of these. This is pattern piece 3A. This is the side back, and you're going to cut 2 of these. This is pattern piece number 5. This is the romper front, and you're going to cut 2 of these. This is pattern piece number 6. This is the romper back, and you're going to cut 2 of these. This is pattern piece number 7. This is the collar. You're going to cut 4 of these on contrast, 2 of interfacing. This is pattern piece number 10. This is the pocket, and you're going to cut 4 of these. All right, let's take a look at our fabric. Here's the main fabric for the bodice. And then there's a contrast fabric for the collar. I did end up switching out this fabric later on. Here is fusible interfacing. You're going to need a 22-inch invisible zipper. You're going to need some bias tape. Now this is single fold bias tape, but you can also use double fold bias tape. If you're using a thicker fabric, this would be ideal for the collar. Otherwise, you can still use the single fold bias tape. And lastly, some buttons for the back of the collar. Okay, let's get to sewing. So first you're going to take your front and side front pieces and you're going to stay stitch the raw edges of the bust and the waist. It is important to not skip this step, as the stay stitching will prevent any stretching and distortion, and it will also ensure that your pattern pieces are matching accurately. You don't have to go all the way down, you just have to stop at the waist, and you're going to go ahead and take that to your sewing machine and stay stitch. And just a reminder, this is for view C of the pattern. For view B, the dress, it is very similar. So I will highlight anywhere that might be a little different. All right, so now with right sides together and matching notches, you're going to pin together pattern piece 1 and 2. And you want to make sure you have more pins concentrated around the bust area because of the curve. So now you're going to take that to your sewing machine and stitch it together. Make sure you clip any curves, and also you'll notice that I serged the ends of my seams. And of course, if you don't have a serger, you don't have to do that. It is completely optional. Now with right sides facing, you're gonna pin the center front together and then you're gonna stitch. Grab your back pieces, and with right sides facing and matching the notches, you're going to pin the side back and the back together. For the back, make sure you are paying attention to the notches so you don't match it at the wrong spot. And I like to just start at the notches itself. It just makes it easier to make sure that you don't miss that notch if you're starting from one end and working your way to the notch. Hopefully that makes sense. This is what it should look like when you are done. Don't forget to press the seams open. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the pockets. Because the print is so busy, I used pins to mark where the pockets would be placed. Place a pocket piece on the side front, right sides together on the circle points, so the pocket side seam lines up and the curve of the pocket is facing towards the center of the front bodice. Repeat on the other side of the front bodice and then on the back bodice, ensuring the pockets on the back bodice lines up with those on the front. Now go ahead and stitch the pockets to the bodice. And here's the back bodice. You're going to do the pockets the exact same way as you did the front bodice. Now, once you're done, you can go ahead and stitch the pocket to the back bodice. Now, go ahead and take this to your sewing machine. So here's the front bodice. Now, with right sides together, you are going to take your back bodice and you're going to match notches on the side seams. And when you are pinning it, you're going to go around the curve of the pocket. That way you don't sew through the pocket because you want to make sure your pocket is actually usable. Once you're done pinning the other side, now you're going to take that to your sewing machine and you're going to stitch the side seams and around the pockets. When stitching around the pockets, my side seams are always facing the actual pocket. So now we're basically done the bodice. So now we're going to be working on the collar. So you're going to stay stitch around the neckline, starting from the back to the center and back to the back. And you want to reinforce that center front as well. All right, so now we have our collar pieces. Now this is different than what I showed in the beginning for the fabric that I was going to use. That was just a decision that I made at the last second. This fabric is also quite stretchy, so because it is a stretchy fabric, I put interfacing on both sides. Now take your collar pieces and with right sides facing and matching the notches, you're going to pin the collar pieces together. You're not going to be stitching around the inner curve, so you don't have to pin that side. As far as choosing the fabric for your collar, you definitely want something that is a little bit more sturdy. You don't want something that is super thin, and you don't want a fabric that is super stretchy like I chose. But it will definitely work if you are putting interfacing on both sides. Okay, so now go ahead and take this to your sewing machine and stitch the collars together. Once I'm done stitching, I trim the corners so it's not bulky. So now take your collars and you're going to turn the collar right sides out. You definitely want to give it a good press, but for now, I'm just going to use some weights to hold mine down. So now you're going to understitch the collar by first pressing the seam towards the interfaced collar. So since both are interfaced, you're going to go to the side that's going to just be facing downwards. So when you're understitching a collar like this one, you may not be able to start on one end and work your way to the other end. So you're just going to have to start where you can and finish where you can. Just try to do as much as you can. All right, so now once you are done understitching, you also want to just base stitch the raw edges together. And so here are your collars. And so on the bottom, you should see the understitching. So when you flip it over to where the top is, you should not see that understitching. You want to make sure your notches are visible. If not, you can go ahead and redo them. It's fine. I sometimes wait till the last second. And that's kind of what I had to do there because I don't think my notches were as prominent, but I want to make sure that it is exactly where it needs to be. So I went ahead and took my pattern piece and placed it on the fabric just so I can cut the notch a little bit deeper. I don't think it was deep enough, just so I don't miss it when I am pinning my collar to the bodice. Okay, so now take your collar piece and you're gonna match the notches first, and then you're gonna go ahead and pin the collar piece on the neckline. Once you get to the back of the neckline, there should be about an inch of space at the end, and that's gonna be for your zipper. If you don't have that extra space at the end, you may want to go back and shorten your collar because without that space, you are not going to be able to add your zipper. You definitely want to pin your collar down because when you add the other collar on, they are going to overlap and you want to make sure that it is secure and in place. And again, you should still have that about 1 inch, maybe about 3/4 of an inch space, and that would be for the zipper. My other tip is that you want to start at the center front when you are sewing and then work your way to the back. So now your collar should be secured to the neckline, and you want to make sure again that you reinforce that corner there at the center front. All right, so let's take a look at the zipper. We want a 22-inch closed invisible zipper. Now you can use a separating zipper, but the way you would place it would be a little different than what I'm going to show you. If you have your own way on how you apply an invisible zipper, feel free to do so. All right, so you're going to take your zipper. I closed it for this part, but I'm going to mark as close to the bottom of the zipper as possible. And this is going to be the mark that will line up with the zipper placement line. All right, so my zipper placement line is marked on the wrong sides of the fabric, so you won't see it. So this is just for reference. I did cut a little snippet for it to be placed so I know exactly where it's going to go. So there's another marking that you're going to make. So about 1 inch above that zipper placement line, you're going to mark another line, and this will be the actual starting point for your stitching. So instead of marking it with a marker, I'm just going to snip exactly where I'm going to place it. All right, so it's about 1 inch above your first line that you made or first marking that you made. The problem with using the first marking is when you go to stitch your zipper to the fabric, it's going to be very difficult. So you got to move it up a little bit, but just marking it, marking at the zipper placement line just helps you to know exactly how low your zipper should go. All right, so now I'm going to place my zipper onto the fabric. And so on the outside of the right side of the fabric, you're going to line up the marked zipper line with the bottom of the placement line. So that should be done here. You want to make sure you're also paying attention to that vertical placement line. So there's a line that runs all the way up to the neckline. You want to make sure that your zipper teeth is lined up on that line. And I made that on the wrong side of my fabric. That way it's not seen on the outside. So just keep that in mind as you are pinning your zipper onto the fabric. The other good thing about having the placement line a little bit away from the raw edge is if you feel like you need to take out your zipper a little bit more, so like to make some more room, you can just move it over instead of having to recut the fabric to make it bigger. Once I reach to the neckline, now I'm gonna go ahead and take this to my sewing machine. And I'm gonna start from the bottom and work my way to the top. I also highly recommend using an invisible zipper foot. Now, if you don't have one, it's going to be a little more challenging, but it is possible. It's doable. It just may not look as invisible as if you use an invisible zipper. And again, I started from the bottom and I'm working my way to the neckline. And make sure at the neckline you backstitch to keep that zipper in place and secure. And this is what it should look like. And now you're going to repeat on the other side with the same exact steps. And again, your zipper teeth should be facing away from the center front and on the vertical placement line. And starting from the bottom, you're going to work your way to the top. Okay, so now here's the last bit of the zipper. And again, that first marking is too close to start stitching. So you want to focus on starting to stitch at that second marking. And this is what it should look like when you are done the zipper. Okay, so go ahead and test it out and just make sure that it works. Make sure you trim any straggling strings. You don't want it to get hooked up into your zipper. So it should close smoothly. And if it doesn't, that's because you probably stitch on top of the zipper teeth. And look at that, you cannot see that zipper, hence the word invisible zipper. So now you're going to finish off the bottom of the zipper all the way to the bottom of the back. You want to make sure your zipper is closed and you're going to turn your garment wrong sides out. And at the bottom of the zipper tape, you're going to pull that up, and with right sides together, you're going to match the back of that garment, and you're going to just pin it together until you get to the bottom where the leg would be. And once you're finished pinning, you're going to take that to your sewing machine. Now you're going to line up your needle starting about 1/4 inch or about 0.5 centimeters above the last stitch, just on the inside of the stitch line. And you're going to make sure that the zipper tape is pushed out so it's not in the way, and back stitch twice, and then you're going to sew the rest of your seam closed. And this is what the garment should look like. So it's almost completed. We just now have to work on the neckline. So go ahead and grab your single fold bias tape. And again, you can use double fold bias tape for this, but I prefer single fold bias tape when the fabric is not too thick. You definitely don't want your neckline to look super bulky, so I highly recommend the single fold bias tape whenever you can. Start by unzipping the back, and you're going to start applying the bias tape on the back. So first you're going to place the first fold of the bias tape on the stitch of the neckline, leaving about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters hanging off the raw edge of the center back. And you're going to pin to the V of the neckline and stop there. So once you get to the V of the neckline, you're going to go ahead and take this to your sewing machine. So you're going to start at the back, so the center back where the raw edge is, and make sure you back stitch. And you're just going to stitch on top of that first fold from the bias tape. The first fold should be on the stitching line that you had before, so right on that collar stitching line. When you get to the V, you're going to slow down and you're going to reinforce the tip with a couple of extra stitches. So now you're at the V point. Now you're going to fold the bias tape so that the right side is facing up, and you're going to use your finger, or you can use something else, just whatever is easiest for you to hold. But you're going to use your finger to hold in place that bias tape. And without moving your finger, you're going to fold the bias tape back so that the wrong side is facing up. This is just going to create a small pleat, so it pivots around the corner. I also found that marking that point helps to line things up a bit better. So when you're back at the sewing machine, you're just going to pivot where you left off and just make sure you're heading in the right direction now. And you're just going to stitch from that point onto the neckline on the other side. Once you are done with that first point of the bias tape, you're going to clip that center V point. And you want to clip it all the way down to the stitching line, not crossing the stitching line. Also, to help reduce bulk, clip off the top of that zipper, but you also want to trim down around that neckline up to the starting point of the bias tape. And in the event that you cut off the metal top of the zipper, that shouldn't be a problem because you should have stitched your bias tape all the way to the end of the raw edge, so it should have covered over the zipper. All right, so now with the back of the bias tape where the zipper is, you're going to press the bias tape up and then fold to the inside, wrapping in the top edge of the zipper. Make sure you press it and then hold it in place. Now lift the collar up and top stitch around the neckline to hold the other folded edge of the bias tape in place. And you're going to go all the way around, pivoting at the V point and all the way to the back of the neckline. And once you get to the V point, you want to just make sure that pleat is laying flat before you continue. And this is what it should look like. It just makes the inside look a lot cleaner. And now we're going to take that same single fold bias tape and we're going to work on the armholes. So like the collar, you're going to open up the bias tape and you're going to place the bias tape about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 centimeter away from the raw edge of the armhole. And you're going to stitch on the fold closest to the raw edge. All right, so I just cut to the chase here because it's very similar to the collar, but you're just going to clip off any remaining and we're going to move on to our next step. So here, you're just going to fold over the bias tape to the wrong side of the armhole, and that's going to make sure that the bias tape is on the inside, so you shouldn't see the bias tape when you're wearing the garment. And so now that you've folded it over to the wrong side of the armhole, you're going to top stitch around the bias tape to hold the other side of the fold in place. So I actually ran out of bias tape, so I only did one side, but I will come back and finish the other side. So we're just going to move on to the bottom of the romper here. To finish the bottom of the romper, you're going to take the notches by the shorts section and match them together right sides facing. and then you're going to stitch it together. Don't forget to press your seams open as well. And last but not least, we are going to hem the bottom of the romper. Now, hemming view B and view C are the same. And so all you're doing is folding the raw edge of the bottom of the dress or the romper, wrong sides together by about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 centimeter, and you're going to press. After you press, you're going to fold over the hem again by 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters, and then you're just going to stitch the top edge of the hem from one end to the other. And don't forget to press again. This part I would consider as optional, but I think, one, it adds a little touch to it, but also it holds your collar in place a little bit better, is adding a 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimeter button to the back of the collar. And that's it. You're done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to tag Dwana Studio in your